Yo, welcome back. Welcome back. Thank you for taking the time to join me on another episode of Learning Manhood. For those of you that don't know, my name is Eddie. I am your fellow student on this journey of trying to figure out what it means to live a godly life and live one that is biblically relevant for today times that are a lot crazier and a lot different than what we read about in the Bible. So trying to find ways to incorporate that into our daily lives so that way we understand what it means to truly live a life of biblical manhood. Our goal here, and I'm glad that you're taking the time to join us on another episode. Today, I have been really contemplating this for a while now, and something I wanted to write about and something that is relevant to our daily lives. Like today, I want to talk about sacrifice. Now, when I start this conversation, I really want to talk about what it means from the perspective of a husband and a father. Sacrifice happens often. It's part of our daily lives, right? To be an effective husband and to be an effective father, I need to be prepared to sacrifice. If you got kids, you know what I'm talking about, right? You sacrifice your time, your energy, your money. Sometimes for people, they even sacrifice their dreams to make sure that their children have a better life. Sacrifice is part of our daily lives. When we talk about the freedoms that we walk in here in the United States, right? People have sacrificed their lives to keep it that way. We talked about in an earlier episode about how failure is one of those things that we just generally don't tolerate. However, it's one of those things that makes for greatness. I think sacrifice falls purely into that example as well, and made me think of how we have to sacrifice for our goals. Usain Bolt, the world's fastest man, right? And as someone that enjoys running, mostly enjoys running, he is somebody that I find inspiring. But he talks about sacrifice, and one of his famous quotes is, "I trained 4 years to run 9 seconds." That takes sacrifice. I'm talking early mornings, sore, injured, making sure you're eating and breathing, you're training. You can't eat the things you want to eat. You can't go do the things you want to do because you got to get up in the morning. I read about Kobe and his training regimen and how his teammates would be like, "Oh man, we just won this game. Let's go out and celebrate." And Kobe would be like, "That's dope, but we got practice in the morning." And so Kobe would go and hang out, but would be the first one in the gym first thing in the morning. Like, that takes sacrifice. That takes sacrifice to get after your goals, to truly really be after the purpose that God has in your life. And I've been fortunate of recently to really been exposed to a lot of great people, a lot of people that are sacrificing everything to make sure they're getting after the purpose that God has for them. And so it made me ask myself, what am I willing to sacrifice? What am I willing to sacrifice to get after the purpose that God has for me? Now, everybody's purpose is different, right? Everybody has different set of goals. Everyone has different set of ambitions. But to accomplish those things, what are we willing to sacrifice? For some of us, I know there's a lot of people that resonate with the idea of being a content creator. And for a lot of us, we don't start simply because we don't have the equipment, we don't have the aesthetic, we don't have all the right things that we think we need to make it happen. And if you're listening to me today, you can tell your boy Eddie ain't got it all together. However, I'm sacrificing the potential for looking crazy from time to time and having some things messed up just so I can learn from it, so I can become better. So the question is, like, what are you willing to give up to sacrifice and achieve your life's purpose, the purpose that God has for you? And there are those of us in the world right now that would say everything. You're like, yeah, I will give up everything to achieve the purpose that not only God has for my life, but the purpose and the goals that I have for my life. I am not built that way. I am squarely in the category of men that had to ask the question, okay, but what is it that I need to do what is it that I exactly need to sacrifice? What is it that I need to weigh against my goals? Because there are certain things that I just am not willing to sacrifice. And this takes me to Genesis 22, right? Abraham has been praying and praying and praying and petitioning to God for a son. He wants a son so bad. It's the one thing that he wants more than anything. And in Genesis 22, God asked Abraham to sacrifice the son that he finally got. It was an impossible task. It's an impossible task. God couldn't give me that task. I would fail. I don't have the faith for that. That is something I aspire to have, but I honestly don't have the faith for that. But Abraham did. He knew that he was going to do whatever it took to reach his goal, reach his purpose, to maintain and strengthen his walk with God. Abraham's goal, his conviction really drove him to being able to potentially give up the one thing that he liked the most, the one thing that he loved the most, not understanding why, not understanding what it would accomplish, not even understanding what would come next, right? And some people look at this story and they use it to bash God. They say, oh, how could a loving God be so cruel to a man to inflict this kind of mental trauma and all that. People love using this story as an example of like how God is crazy. But if you really look at it, or I guess if you change your perspective as you look at it, because I can understand why people say that. I can understand why that perspective is prevalent, because using the knowledge that we have just at face value, that sounds crazy. But if you dig into it a little bit, the point of this story is the exact point that people, like the greatest people that walk the earth today, that have walked the earth, aspire to, right? People like Muhammad Ali, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King Jr. You have to be willing to give up everything to obtain your purpose in life. God wanted Abraham to see himself. God wanted Abraham to understand his own heart and to know that he was fully submitted to God's purpose in life and his walk with God. Do you know how freeing that is to have God point that out to you? I pray all the time for God to show me the things about me that are good, because often I focus on the things that are bad, the things that I know I need to work on, the things that I feel like I fall short on, because we're all our own worst critic, right? God took the time to show Abraham that your heart is in the right place. You're doing the things I need you to do. You are chasing after the right purpose, the right goal. And honestly, that is gotta be a freeing experience. For those of you that have not read this story, I imagine there are some of you that have not, and you're still listening and you're like, this is a crazy story. I need to go look at Genesis to see if Eddie is out here tripping. For those of you that don't know, in the end, right before Abraham was about to sacrifice his son Isaac, God stops him and provides a ram for the sacrifice. And it's this heartfelt moment. And the thing that really resonated with me the most in this is that Isaac, his son, was also so bought into, so in tune with God's word, that Isaac was going to go willingly. Isaac was going to go willingly. Do you know what kind of man you have to be to have inspired your son to believe in God the way that you believe in God? Now, if that's not learning manhood, I don't know what is. How do you go forth and teach your children the love and respect and the fear of the Lord so passionately that they're willing to give up their own life? Like, it is an amazing story, and it's definitely one that we should take some time to reflect on as we are learning to be the biblical man that we're wanting to be. But the next part of that is, what is life actually like fully submitted to God, right? What is life looking like today fully submitted to God? If you're picturing, the first thing I pictured was like a nun. Someone might say, oh, like a televangelist at a mega church, on TV every day, speaking the gospel every single day and walking the walk. I pictured a nun. Why? Because honestly, God does not call us all to be famous and rich and influential. Like, for some of us, that's going to be our walk. The vast majority of us, it's not going to be our walk. Our walk is going to be something more contained, like a teacher showing love to children in need, a police officer praying over the person they just had to arrest, or an accountant, spending his spare time at work preaching the word. Like, these are what it looks like for us regular folk walking a life fully submitted to God. I'm not going to say that God doesn't have amazing things for us. But if we look at a life fully submitted to God and think that it's going to come with riches and fame and all that stuff like that, then we're putting the wrong things in priority. If the priority is really to become as close to God as we can be, that is what a life fully submitted to God looks like. The one thing that ties all those individuals together is that you have to sacrifice to get there. To be the type of teacher that is going to show love to children in need, you're going to have to sacrifice and show more patience than you're probably prepared to give. I don't know about you guys. My mom was a teacher the entire time I was growing up, and I can't deal with other people's children. Like, I got 3 of my own kids. I can't deal with other people's children. So I know that it takes some serious amount of patience to pour into a classroom full of jacked up kids that don't want to learn math, right? It takes some patience. You got to sacrifice that moment where you just want to yell at these kids and be like, yo, sit down before I hurt somebody, to show that kind of love. A police officer praying over the person they just had to arrest, like to have that kind of wherewithal to be like, okay, I know that you have done a thing. It is against the law and my job to uphold the law, but I need to pray for you so that way I don't see you again, that I'm hoping that this is the moment for you. That takes a lot of humility, and that takes a lot of care. An accountant or anyone trying to preach it, share the gospel at work, even if it's not even sharing the gospel directly, but trying to walk the humility and walk in the faith that is living for Jesus Christ, is a difficult task because Christians are outliers. It's hard to be a Christian simply because it's hard to follow these very radical views of trying to say, turn the other cheek, trying to be humble, trying to be patient, trying to be calm. These things are very, very difficult to pour into people more than you're pouring into yourself, while also making sure that you're getting poured into from God. Like, these are difficult things to accomplish on a regular basis because we are built to be selfish. We are built to be self-serving. This Sunday, my pastor talked about how we are inherently selfish. That the first few words we learn as children, mom, dad, no, and mine. It's the first thing we learn is to be selfish. I want this thing. It is mine. I remember dealing with mine a lot with my children. There was a significant age gap between my oldest child and then my second child. And my oldest child struggled with the idea of sharing a thing with this new baby. And then in turn, that second child struggled with the idea of sharing things with his younger brother. We learn inherently that things should belong to us, that I should have my way, and living a life fully submitted to God is not having your way. Now, that's not to say that God doesn't know your heart. God knows your heart. He's not going to spend your entire life being like, okay, so I know you hate peas, so today all we're going to do is eat peas. Like, that's just ridiculous, right? God called us to enjoy our lives. You're not supposed to be miserable serving God. That's not the point. It's not the point at all. However, giving up all of that, your own control, to living a life fully submitted to God is a sacrifice. Because there are things God asked me to do that I don't want to do. I'm just going to keep it a buck with you. I don't want. This morning, I went to go run. I enjoy running most of the time, but I'm a little bit out of shape. And so running these days has not been fun. I slacked up on my game for a while, and now getting back into the swing of running is awful. And so when he was like this morning, I was praying, I was going through what it is I wanted to talk about today, just praying for my family. And he was like, you're going to go for a run. I didn't want to. I really didn't. But I listened, and I enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed it. It wasn't a terrible run. And so while God is consistently asking us to do things we may not want to do, it turns out for the better. For example, I have to look at it like this all the time for my own growth and my own journey. There are times when I try to tell my kids, this is a thing that you should be doing. Let's talk about money. My kids love spending money. Love it. It is like an Olympics level sport to them. They love spending money. And so it makes it difficult because I've been trying to instill these ideologies about saving money and putting things away for a rainy day. And in their mind, because of the lifestyle my wife and I have been able to cultivate for them, they're just like, there's no such thing as rainy days. We're going to spend it all now. And it frustrates me, but they just don't want to do it. They don't want to do it because to them, they don't see the point. I see the point, but I've got more life experience. I've been out in the world by myself. They haven't yet. They're still under the umbrella of mom and dad. So from their perspective, their limited view, what I'm telling them to do makes no sense, and they don't want to do it. Why save this little $5 when I can buy $5 worth of Skittles today? Why? I try to look at it the same way when God asks me to do a thing I don't want to do. Like there's maybe I needed that run this morning specifically for the mental reinforcement that, hey, you can get back into enjoying running. He sees a bigger picture than I do. So I have to trust, believe, and love so that way I can sacrifice from a place of gratitude. It's like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. Now, granted, there are times where I have to tell God, I'm going to do this thing, but I'm going to be mad the whole time. I'm going to sit in the back seat of this car and I'm going to pout the whole time, but I'm going to go do the thing. And I think that's fair. I think that's fair. God knows our heart and knows that we are trying to be better. I implore you all, and I really think about a lot about this concept of talking to my younger self. If I could tell my younger self to really hone in on what sacrifice means, really hone in on what it means to be proud of my sacrifices, I think I would have done a lot better coming into my marriage. Because coming into my marriage, I was still very, very selfish. It's like, what do you mean you want me to do video? You want me to do dishes? I'm trying to play video games over here. What do you mean you want me to put my shoes in a specific place? I bought this house. I don't need to put my shoes anywhere. Like, I'm grown now. You're not my mama, right? But what it came down to, I was missing the point of the thing my wife valued was this neatness that I just inherently was trying to avoid entirely. And so I was not sacrificing the couple of seconds it would have taken me to line my shoes up and put them over here on this little weird bench that she bought specifically for shoes. There's little things like that that caused arguments and caused disarray that didn't need to cause disarray. Understanding that I can sacrifice 40 minutes of a video game to go clean the dishes and put a smile on my wife's face. I really want to hone into how, as men, we need to be proud of the sacrifices we made. We spend a lot of time getting angry about the sacrifices we made, and I think we should really be proud of the work that we're putting in. We got to give ourselves some credit as we're learning how to be better men, because these sacrifices are important. And these sacrifices are for the greater good. They are. I use the example with some of my buddies that it's Sunday night and you have to start on a project that's due Monday morning because your child just so happened to forget to let you know. And you're frustrated because you were ready to go to sleep and now you got to go to the store and get a poster board and figure out how to make planets, how to paper mache, and will it dry in the morning? All this jazz is going on. And we get so angry because we have lost sleep. We get so angry because this is a last minute thing and it didn't fit into our plan. And you have sacrificed all this time, energy that did not have to be sacrificed. But at the same time, you held it down for your kid, man. Like, be proud of that. You tired today because you were up all night working on a project. But guess what? Your child did not go to school looking embarrassed because they didn't have the project. And it's not even like, yes, they are going to make the grade that they're going to make because it's last minute and the paper mache ain't dry. That is what it is. However, you got to send your child to school without the embarrassment of showing up empty-handed. We have to be proud of that sacrifice. We have to be proud of the times where it's like, man, I really want to buy myself a new pair of shoes, but instead I'm going to buy my son another basketball hoop so he can continue practicing. That is a solid sacrifice. And we often don't look at our sacrifices, even down to the minute things of, oh man, I to make sure that you guys got a chance to go and experience this thing, I didn't spend this money elsewhere. We have to be proud of these moments. If we're going to be intentional and purposeful when it comes to learning how to be a man of God, we need to be proud of the sacrifices we made. Jesus was proud of the sacrifice he made for all of us. He did it willingly. He picked up his cross and he took the most brutal beatdown ever, the most humiliating beatdown, simply to look after us. So why would we then turn around and not pick up our cross, sacrifice for our loved ones, sacrifice for our families, sacrifice to walk in God's will, sacrifice to walk in our purpose, and not be proud of that? I know now more than I have in the past few years of my life what I'm willing to sacrifice. I think my faith needs to grow until I get to where Abraham was. However, I'm being intentional about that growth. I'm being intentional about trying to strengthen my faith with these little things every day where I'm trying to pray before I do a thing. I'm actually reading a book from this man named Chris Hodges. It's called Pray First. I'll link it in the description below. I'm not affiliated in any way, shape, or form. I just like the book. And it's really touching on how we should pray before we do anything. Anything. And not this long, drawn out, like just I have a conversation with God like I have a conversation with you all. All right, God, I'm done doing this thing. What do I do next? What's the next move? And that is something that I am currently learning how to do. That is something that this book talks about on how to have these little moments with God to not only strengthen your faith, but strengthen your ability to listen. We talked about being smart enough to listen and wise enough to act. I want to be wise enough to act, so I have to be smart enough to listen. I have to continually ask the right questions. And so at first, you have to pray. You've got to ask the question. Take some time. Think about what it is that is in between you and your walk with God. For me, I was struggling with letting go some of my habits. And it wasn't that these habits were terrible per se. It was that I cared about them so much that I would let them get in the way of listening to God. That's another thing that I equate back to being a parent. When I want to get my child's attention, I take their favorite toy. Now I have their undivided attention, and they're going to do the things that I ask them to do because I have the one thing that they really want. And so if God asks you to sacrifice that one thing in your life that you pay the most attention to, whether it be social media, whether it be drinking, whether it be time you spend sitting in front of the TV, any of these things, these habits that we have, if God asks you to sacrifice those things so that way he has your undivided attention, are you willing to do it? Are you willing to sacrifice to get to your full purpose in God's plan? That's my question for you all this week. I look forward to hearing you guys' responses. Hit me up on Instagram. Hit me up in the comments here, or just shoot me an email at cultivatedmindsman@gmail.com. Look, I'm more than willing to have a conversation with you. I'm looking forward to connecting with all of you. Until next time, y'all, God bless.